Welcome back to another video. My name is Derek, and today we're going to be taking a look at this iPhone 12 Pro Max. It's got a few issues which we'll get into in a second, and those are Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular, things like that. Looking at it, I can tell that the back glass has been replaced, and the frame is also kind of broken towards the bottom here, which leads me to think that it's either going to be caused from a glass breaker or whatever caused the back glass to break affected the motherboard. So let's dive in, take a look, see what the issue is, see if it's fixable, and hopefully fix it. Let's get started. Alright, so iPhone 12 Pro Max. When we go into the settings, we can see that not only has the display been replaced, I guess it's an unknown part, but cellular is an issue under the parts and service history. When we go and we look at Wi-Fi, it is grayed out. And when we go to Bluetooth, it constantly thinks it's not working. We go to cellular, it just says an update is required to use cellular data on this iPhone. So it's definitely got an error there. And if you look really carefully right here, you can actually see when I squeeze the frame kind of coming back into alignment with itself. So let's take this thing apart and see if we can determine what's wrong. Go ahead and turn it off. Take out the pentalobe screws. I have no idea how well the back glass was adhered, so I'm just gonna go at this carefully. And look at the back glass just popped right off. So this back glass, oh gosh, okay. So that's not supposed to happen. I can read here. We can read here. It doesn't even look like it was adhered at all. But let's take a look. They messed up the external charging coil here. I don't see any crazy impacts. You'd typically see like a glass breaker leave like an indentation, almost like what you can kind of get right there where there's this little hit. Hard to say. There is what looks like a decent little spot right here. Now this obviously won't work. To get the screen off, we'll get out our phone opener here. We'll slide that in and tighten this down. Now I'm not sure what quality of display is being used, so I'm not going to use any isopropyl alcohol, or I'm going to try not to use alcohol, because this could be an LCD. Hard to say what quality it is without opening and looking, but we'll clamp that down and we'll open up the screen. Let's see, it's splitting the frame here, so I'm going to push the frame back down, and there we go, that side popped up. Let's get the other side up. Give it a little bit of a pry here. See if we can get that to pop. There it goes. Go up a bit more till we max out. All right, let's take a look at the phone here. All right, looks like they're using an AQ7. Let's take out the motherboard and see what we're dealing with here. So this board has a 5G antenna, so we have to take out the battery. We disconnected the battery, disconnect the display connector, take off this shield bracket, and disconnect the proximity sensor. And off comes the screen. You give a little pry on this battery, see if they adhered it at all, and it's already moving. So that battery isn't even in there. All wrinkly. Fun. Okay, and I'm looking down the phone and you can see there's quite a bit of a warp from the bottom to the top, causing an issue with the board here. We'll take out the screws that hold down the motherboard, pop out the SIM tray, and we can take out the SIM card reader, disconnect the charge port flex, disconnect the power button flex, the antennas, front-facing camera assembly, and the rear cameras. Boy, would it be nice to just have a connector for the 5G antenna. Take out the screws for the 5G antenna, disconnect the 5G antenna, lift that out, and we'll carefully lift out the board and take a look at it. Now, looks like we've got like some maybe glue, like some bluish stuff. Let's clean that up. Get some isopropyl alcohol and wipe all that stuff away. All right, so I don't see anything right away. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully lift up the sticker here. What that'll hopefully give us a good look at is whether or not there's any impacts on the motherboard that are obvious. And the best way to find the impacts is to hold it the light just right. And I'm not seeing any crazy impacts anywhere. So I'm thinking that this is going to be an issue with the sandwich board, just from experience, but we won't know until we agitate it. So we're going to do hopefully one thing. If not, we'll do two things. The first thing we're going to try is just to get this board up to temperature to where the top board starts to want to move, and then we'll let it cool down. That'll fix any breaks in the solder joints if that's all it was, allowing then the top board to communicate properly with the bottom board. If that doesn't work, we're going to have to split the boards because there's most likely going to be pad damage. And that does make for an interesting video, but we'll see if we need to do that. But first, we're going to remove these foam stickers. So I'm just going to add a bunch of isopropyl to them, because these will shrivel up and cause us issues if we choose to leave them. So grab the sticker, gently let the alcohol release the adhesive. We could use this at the end. We'll put it back and we'll lift up this sticker so we can reuse it when the time comes. And the little one down here, just like that. All right, so I'm gonna get out my bore heater. This is the L2023 XZZ for the 12 series. Got the 12 Pro Max, and that goes right here. See, it lines up with those little guys. And what I'm noticing right off the bat, there is a bit of almost like a twist. Just like the phone twisted, maybe there's a twist in the board. Hard to say. So we're gonna go and turn this on, and we're gonna take this up to 210. We'll just let this warm up, and we're gonna let the solder melt. I'm gonna be, once we get up to temperature, I'll be looking at any type of movement in the top board. If we get any, then we'll know we're there, and then we'll let it cool down. One thing that I'm going to do in this case is we're going to put down these clamps. They don't put a whole lot of pressure, but they're going to keep the motherboard nice and sturdy against the heat plate on all sides. So things might start to move here in a little bit. I've just got everything pressurized so that it won't move. If anything, it will help keep the solder joints from splitting it up more. And we'll let this heat up all the way, finally at 200 there. And then we'll agitate it a little bit just by tapping, and we'll then let it cool down and test it. All right, we are now at the 210 mark. It's beeped. I probably can't pick it up on the camera, but there's a little bit of flux. You can see kind of movement in between the sandwich layer. Very faint right there, all the way around. So I'm just going to go around, give it little taps. I can see it kind of move down a little bit, compress against the other board just slightly. I mean, it's not like they're kissing or anything causing squeeze out. There's definitely movement. All right, now that we've let this sit for a few minutes and I've tapped on it, we're just going to turn it off and let this cool down for the next like 20-30 minutes, something to where it's naturally cooled down with the pressure on its own, and then we'll test it. That way, between now and then, I can just do other repairs. All right, it's all cooled down to the touch, so let's take this off of there. Let's see if we have any change when we put it back inside the housing. All right, so we've got the board back in enough to connect things up and test. All right, we've got all those cables connected. Now we'll connect up the 5G antenna. We'll connect up the charge port. We'll connect up the display and the proximity sensor. And last, the battery. Just enough. Now we'll go ahead and turn it on. We hope to see the Apple symbol again. There's the Apple logo. That's good. And when this comes on, hopefully we have no more issues with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular. If we do, that means we do have to split the boards. So let's see where this leads us. All right, we got a low battery. All right, we still have an issue with cellular service. And when we go and we look at Wi-Fi, it's still grayed out. Same with Bluetooth. So let's see if we can figure out why that is. Now, the closer I look at the board here, I actually do see right here a low spot. If you catch the light just right, there's a low spot here. Now, that could just be the motherboard, kind of how it is, or that could be an impact point. We'll get out our platform again, and this time we'll heat it up and split the boards. To split this, I'm going to be using this tool. It's got a bunch of different little blades that are nice and thin, flexible. We'll turn this on, and we'll let this heat back up again. And using this tool, we'll be able to split the boards. Something else that's going to be really helpful is we're going to take out this iPhone motherboard separation assistance pan, and I'm going to screw it down on one of these standoff platforms there. So we'll let this heat up. All right, so we're at the 210. So now we're just going to play around with this for a few minutes as we watch for it to want to split. This tool is slim enough to slide in between the layers, and with a little bit of almost like a twist, but barely any. I can see it. I can see if it's going to lift or not. And it's split on this side. So I'm just going to go over here and we're going to lift a little bit on this side. And we can lift that top one off. And we'll turn this off and let it cool down. But we can definitely see now what our issue is. So if we look here along this edge, you can see all of the different color all over. This side looks fine. This looks okay. All the way over to here. And then when you start to see this copper looking pads all throughout here. And then when we look at the top, what you'll see is kind of a brown looking amount. So we're missing what probably looks like 100 pads. Now, not all of these are crucial. Some of them are ground pads that aren't important. Some are. There is a lot of work that would need to go into fixing this one. So let's take a quick look and see how many need to go back. All right, so if we are looking here, we've got ground, and then a pad. Ground. We got one missing pad here. That's critical. This one's critical. We jump over 1, 2, critical. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's ground, so it may not be too important. Nothing here is important. And this is all ground except when we cross over, in which case all of these middle ones going across are important. And this one. So we're missing this one, these. Okay. And then it looks like almost all of the inside ones are important here. And we are definitely missing the insides. That one's important. That one's a ground. So it looks like for the most part, every single pad that we're missing is going to be important and we need to put back. Looks like the highest up pad that's missing is these two right here. So looks like we're missing these two. Of course, it has to be the important ones. So boom, doom, ground. So at this point, it's almost as if I should just start rebuilding all the pads and not worry about which one is really critical or not. Each pad is going to take roughly, I'd say, at any given time, about a minute. So this is at least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours of work just to rebuild the pads. I'm not going to show you every single pad being rebuilt, but I'm going to show you how I rebuild a pad at least so you can get an idea of how much effort is going to go into fixing this one. This side's really good. No pulled pads. We're going to be reballing the bottom board, which I don't think has any missing pads. I think all of the pads got sheared away from the top board, which is typically what happens anyway. So some of these are going to be tougher to rebuild than others. Well, let's get going. Now, this isn't really the easiest thing to see, but when you're looking down through the microscope, there's kind of between the 3 points, for example, here, there's a nice dark triangle. It kind of is hidden behind this semi-transparent board layer. You can see here another triangle, here another triangle. If I can expose the leads, if I can expose the lead here, I'm going to have much more of a surface area for something to grab to. So for example, I can do this in focus. If I take a scalpel and I start to scrape, let's put some isopropyl alcohol on there so it's easier to see. All right, you can see, let's zoom out so it's easier to see actually. And let's brush off that. You can see better the trace that I was trying to get at. And one thing I accidentally did, so we're going to have to double check this, is that little amount that I exposed on this side might be ground plane. So we can't have that. That can't be there. If it is ground plane, there's a couple things we can do. If it's a trace, we just need to protect it with some UV mask. But if it's ground plane, we can just remove it, kind of cut it away. So we'll get out a multimeter. And normally I don't accidentally knock or uncover ground plane, but in this case I think we did. So all right. Well, nothing in there is screaming that it's a touching ground, but I still think that that's ground plane. I just don't think my probe is sharp enough to touch it. Let's see if we can do a little bit better job on the next one. There. And all I'm doing is making the surface area a little bit bigger for the pad so that when I solder I have something nice to grab onto other than the just 3 teeny tiny dots that are hard enough to tin as it is because of how small this is. Alright, so it took maybe 45 seconds to go over and quickly knock out the next row. We'll start with this one as an example. Alright, so we've got 4 pads. Alright, so we've got 4 pads ready to go down. Take the iron, and this is kind of the tricky hard part. And for this we're going to need some flux, and we're just going to tack each one of these down. What's kind of nice is when you get it into spot, you can like feel it suck down onto the pad, onto the traces below it. And we'll just solder these on down. Alright, so if we secured them well enough, we should be able to brush them fairly aggressively with some isopropyl alcohol and a brush. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do just that. Okay, so let's just go over the ones we've done, just so you can see. Alright, so this one, that one, that one, that one, and this one. Okay, they aren't perfectly centered, but they're so close, it's good enough. So now all we need to do is take some UV mask, and we're just going to carefully paint over them. And I'm going to do a dab down inside this one before I forget to cover up that one little tiny spot that I think is ground plane. Now this is too much UV mask, so we're going to remove some of it. There, that's plenty. Okay, that one little spot that I was worried about is covered up down on that one. And we'll just cure this with the UV light. And all I have to do now is that about, what was that, 5 of them? So I have to do that about 20 more times. Alright, so once I've gotten it to the point where I've used the UV mask, all I do is carefully go over each one of them and just take a second to clear away the top coating of the UV mask. This is definitely a job that requires a bit of patience and persistence, but it's also rewarding. Alright, so let's just show you the progress so far. So we started right here with this group. We fixed